Right, evening everybody. It is Monday, the 11th of July, and we'll crack on with a few more because I need to get back in front of myself, having been ill last week, which was jolly lovely. So we'll do two tonight, and then I can have a bit of a rest tomorrow. So I've got my leg stuck. Ow, ow. There we go. Oh, that really hurt. We've done some rye and we've done a whole heap of bourbon, and I've still got a couple of my own bottles that I have to crack open. So I thought tonight we'd do two of mine, which are both from Tennessee. So first one is this one, George Dickel, number 12, not 12-year-old. It's one of those sort of bits of labelling where you could quite easily think it's a 12-year-old because of the prominence of the number 12 on it, but it is actually number 12 recipe. Now, there is a George Dickel 8, which again isn't an 8-year-old, but that's like their standard version, and this is the slightly older version of it, the slightly more premium. So, George Dickel was a German guy who was born in 1818 and emigrated to the US in 1844. And in 1850, he opened a retail store in Nashville, Tennessee. Now, I'm not going to put the map up because I'll put the map up of where the distillery is, which is slightly different. So in the 1860s, having kind of got this retail store, in the 1860s he started to become a bit of a wholesaler for whiskey in particular, as well as like moonshine and other spirits. And in the 1870s, a distillery not far away called Cascade Hollow started distilling, and they became quite a key retailer of it. So here's the map of where Cascade Hollow is. So it's between Nashville and I remembered it when I put it on the map, and I can't remember where it was now. I'm not going to look. It's between Nashville and something Chattanooga, maybe that. Whatever. It's between Nashville and somewhere, but it's not in Nashville directly. So it's southeast of Nashville. Now, George Dickel's brother-in-law, a guy called Victor Schwab, became a partner in Dickel's business, and in 1888 bought a major share of the Cascade Hollow distillery, and they became sole distributor of the company themselves. Now, within 10 years of Cascade Hollow being launched, the distillery opening, it was getting a really, really good reputation, and the owners themselves were their implication was that if they distilled at night, it would end up being a smoother whiskey. So the marketing campaign actually called, like, the tagline was essentially "mellowed by moonlight." So Dickel's company had a major share, and then as various other partners within the distillery kind of like fell by the wayside, they eventually took over the entire distillery itself. Now, Dickel himself died in 1894. His wife, Augusta, they thought she was going to pass on the business, but she held on to it to 1916, and then it all went to Schwab in her will. Now, Schwab himself actually really fought hard against Prohibition, and he put a lot of money towards sort of fighting against it, but obviously unsuccessful. And they ended up relocating the Cascade brand to the Stitzel-Weller distillery in Kentucky. So they carried on going, because Stitzel-Weller carried on as the kind of spirits for medicinal use throughout Prohibition. Prohibition was repealed in 1937. The Schwab family sold the Dickel / Cascade brand to a company called Shenley Distilling Company. Now, they then started producing it at the old Fire Copper distillery, which would eventually become George T. Stagg, Buffalo Trace. But in 1958, they actually rebuilt the distillery at Cascade Hollow. It was a mile away from where it was originally, but it was like in that same region. It was still using the same water source. And at that time, they then decided to call it George Dickel rather than Cascade. So this, if the decision had been made, you'd be drinking, or I would be about to pour a Cascade Tennessee whiskey. Glug, 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 glug. So, through various mergers, buyouts from that point on, Shenley eventually, through various other company names and things like that, became part of Diageo. And Diageo own the George Dickel distillery and brand. Now, they do have a rye, but the rye is made at MGP in Indiana. Their own Tennessee whiskies are made at the distillery itself. Now, this particular one, the 12, is 84% corn, 8% rye, and 8% malted barley. Now, they use the Lincoln County process, which is also what Jack Daniels use. So that's filtering through maple charcoal, and they also chill filter it as well. And it does. I'll read off the label what it says. So inspired early on, George discovered that his whiskey made in the cold winter months tasted smoother. Not strictly true. In fact, no, it's not I'm telling you complete nonsense about distilling at night rather than during the day. They'd found that if they distilled and matured it in winter rather than summer, it actually made for a smoother whiskey. So that's where the Mellowed by Moonlight comes from, because it was darker nights. I nearly got it wrong. I did get it wrong, but at least I had the bottle to keep me straight. So, tasted smooth in cold winter months. Today we follow this tradition by chilling our whiskey before filtering it through sugar maple charcoal. So, they're making no bones about the fact that they chill filtration and they're filtering it through charcoal. Something that Scotch, there's this whole thing with Scotch about do you chill filter, do you not chill filter, it takes body flavour, all of this lot. I'm just trying to look at anything else on here. The rich flavours of number 12 come from resting our whiskey in oak barrels for years longer than our classic number 8 blend. I mean, years longer, it could be 1 year, to be honest. There is no age statement on it. There is all sorts of fancy stuff on the label to make it look very traditional and very old and all oldie worldy and all of this lot. Interestingly, it says on the back label, bottled by George Dickel & Co., Norwalk, Connecticut, weirdly. So presumably that's where Diageo's bottling plant is, but I didn't actually check into that. Anyway, so there we go. So it's made at Cascade Hollow, it's owned by Diageo, and this one's quite highly regarded. Now, it's a 90 proof, 45% ABV, and Master and Malt are selling this for £59.15, but in America you're looking at about $20 to $22, and the Classic 8 is about 15 to 18, so it's not that much more expensive for the number 12, and yet apparently this is a much better whiskey, well worth that price difference. Now, there's a slight nuttiness on here, and this is like Brazil nuts, but it's almost like Brazil nut shells. There's a nice heat to it. There's quite a bitter chocolate as well. It's like a really high cocoa dark chocolate. So we're getting into the sort of the 80-85% dark chocolate bars, where you're starting to get the intensity and almost an earthiness to it. But there is a definite, and it's Brazil nut more than anything else, more than hazelnuts or anything. It's definite Brazil nuts, but it's Brazil nuts and those really thick brown shells that they're in as well. Very, very intense. Not much fire, not much heat on the nose, but it smells oily as well. Intriguing. Not what I was expecting at all. There's more of an edge on the palate than there is on the nose. There's a bit more of a bite at the back of the throat. There's heat, but it's not massive. That slight oiliness is there still. And there is still this Brazil nut element to it as well. It's not too prominent. As somebody that doesn't really like nuts myself, it's actually pleasant. It's not something that's too nutty for my liking, but it's definitely there, and it's definitely Brazil nuts. The dark chocolate element, not so much there on the nose, but there is some fruitiness as well, and it's kind of like cloudy apple juice and pears as well. Not quite poached pears though, it's like fresh pears. That nuttiness is definitely there on the nose there. It's pretty well balanced actually. It does have a bit of a kick to it. Just overpowers it slightly on the back of the throat. This would work really well in cocktails. And again, the nuttiness is coming through. But it's pretty well balanced. It's quite drying, it's quite almost a tannic element in terms of it dries your mouth out, but the finish is decent, it's there, but you do have quite a dry mouth afterwards. But the balance is pretty good. There's enough heat for people that want that kind of burn from an American whiskey. There's a decent balance of flavours in there. It's not massively complex. And the finish is there, but it's not hugely long. It does die off quite quickly, and I think it's because of because of it drying out your mouth. There isn't really any saliva left in your mouth to be able to taste anything. This would go really well in cocktails because it's got enough bite to kick through, but actually it's not. It's got enough balance and enough flavour underneath it that it drinks neat on its own. It's a good sipping whiskey. It's a very good sipping whiskey. It's maybe slightly too nutty for my liking, and I've got a whole bottle to get through eventually. But it's a completely different beast to Jack Daniels, and at $21 a bottle, that's actually a very, very interesting whiskey. And at $21, I would say yes, get it. If you like rye whiskies and you like a nutty rye whiskey, definitely one to go for. And if Jack Daniels is about the same price, I'd have that in a heartbeat over Jack Daniels. Would I pay 60 quid for it? No, I'll be honest, no I wouldn't. There is obviously a markup for getting it over here, for the rarity of it in the UK, that sort of thing, but 60 quid is too steep for that. It's a very intriguing rye, and it's an unusual rye as well. It's much better than I thought it was going to be. You sort of look at that label and it looks a bit supermarket labelly, and it sort of looks a bit Jack Daniels-y as well, in terms of like the traditional style. If you see the 8-year-old as well, you see that really is kind of like the lawyers have been on them for that. But it's actually an interesting, unusual rye whiskey, which if you can find it in America for that price is a very, very good price indeed. That surprised me because I thought that was going to be pretty cheap and cheerful, to be perfectly honest, and it's not. It's got a lot more complexity than I thought was going to be in there. Right, the master distiller, George Dickel, it was a guy called John Lunn who was there from 2005 to 2015, and in 2015 he went across to another distillery, also in Tennessee. I am going to do a bit of a rinse out, and then I shall come back and we shall see you tomorrow for the distillery where John went to. So I'll see you then. Cheers. Bye.